Good morning, everyone, and happy Thursday. We have an amazing show today for everybody. Nomiki Konst and Rina Shah are with us for Team Rising, and they're going to weigh in on Elon Musk's opposition to a wealth tax. Plus, Brianna Joy Gray discusses the state of the governor's race in Virginia, and Kim Iverson joins us later this morning.
But first, day 2 of the U.S. versus Julian Assange is underway. The case before the British appellate court has taken on new urgency for Assange's defense after a report from Yahoo News revealed the CIA's plans under Mike Pompeo to kidnap Assange from the Ecuadorian embassy and even contemplated options for assassinating him. In court papers filed with the court and released Wednesday, Assange's lawyers cited the story as grounds for the British courts to reject the U.S. government's request for extradition. Quote, in short, there is a large and cogent body of extraordinary and unprecedented evidence that the CIA has declared Mr. Assange as a hostile enemy of the USA, one which poses very real threats to our country and seeks to revenge him with significant harm beyond the fact of his prosecution, his lawyers wrote. Lawyers for Assange also told the court Wednesday that the Wikileaks founder is suffering from an autism disorder that could drive him to suicide if he is extradited to the U.S. British politician Jeremy Corbyn, who has served as the leader of the Labour Party and has been a member of Parliament since 1983, spoke in favor of Assange's release. Let's take a listen.
Being held to account is not easy, and sometimes it's quite uncomfortable. I hold a public office. I'm held to account for what I do. My colleagues are as well. That is what democracy is about and what democracy looks like. But it's not just holding politicians to account by parliaments. It's being held to account by a genuine, free and demanding press. Julian Assange has held the world's leaders to account. They found it too uncomfortable. Therefore, he is in Belmarsh. I simply say this: journalism is not a crime. Release Julian Assange. Thank you.
Assange's legal team initially told judges he would not attend because he was not well. He later attended via a video link from prison. Julian Assange's brother, Gabriel Shipton, joins us to discuss. Gabriel, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And so day 2 of this appellate hearing is the day that the defense presents its case. Yesterday, the prosecution brought forward its argument. How has it been going so far?
Well, I mean, the first thing that struck me, Ryan, was I haven't seen Julian since October last year. I saw him just before the prison went into a 10-month COVID lockdown. And it was the first time I had seen him since October. And I was, I was shocked at the way he looked. It's almost like he's aged 5 years in one. As a family member, that was quite emotional for me to see him like that. As you mentioned in the lead up, there was the explosive Yahoo News story, over 30 sources from within the intelligence community confirming plots by the CIA to kidnap and murder Julian. And then off the back of that story, there was the Drop the Charges Coalition. So there are 25 press freedom and human rights groups who, off the back of that story, wrote a letter to Merrick Garland, calling for the charges against Julian to be dropped because of the threats to press freedom. So we went into yesterday's hearing with these things in mind, with this sort of momentum. And, the hearing takes a bizarre turn when for half the day they're talking about, how good the US prison conditions are, or, how likely Julian is to act on an impulse to kill himself. So, this is the biggest press freedom case, since the Pentagon Papers. And for some reason, the prosecution is trying to assure the British courts that the prison system in the US, is not, they're trying to make it seem like a nice place. So it's just this sort of bizarre disconnect that, this sort of veil of legality that has been put around Julian's persecution and this sort of continuation of punishment by process in this case.
We know that the key witness in this case, Siggi Þórðarson, was jailed in Iceland's highest security prison on September 24th. He was recruited by the U.S. to build a case against Assange. Assange is wanted for the publication of thousands of classified documents in 2011 that revealed how the U.S. military had killed hundreds of civilians in unreported incidents during the war in Afghanistan, while leaked Iraq war files showed that 66,000 civilians had been killed and prisoners tortured by Iraqi forces. U.S. lawyers said it had now given 4 binding assurances as to how Mr. Assange would be treated if extradited. It would not impose a highly restrictive form of solitary confinement on Mr. Assange before or after trial, although it could do so if he committed a further offense. Mr. Assange could apply to serve a sentence in Australia, and the U.S. would agree to that transfer. Prison authorities would ensure Mr. Assange would receive, quote, any clinical and psychological treatment that prison doctors recommended, and Mr. Assange would also not be sent to ADX Florence, a U.S. supermax prison reserved for the worst offenders. But is there, do you have any faith that these conditions would be, that the U.S. government would uphold its side of the deal when it writes into the terms specifically that they could revise them arbitrarily if they thought, if suddenly they decide otherwise?
No, I mean, no faith at all. All these assurances have caveats. They're not legally binding. They're a political agreement. Agnes Callamand from Amnesty International has called out these assurances that, for what they are. They're just basically empty words that can be changed at any time. Particularly, considering that one of the people who can decide to move Julian, if he is extradited, to move him into SAMS or ADX Florence is the director of the CIA, who, the previous director had plans to kidnap and murder him. So you can't trust these assurances one bit. And coming to the, Julian being able to serve his sentence in Australia. So by the time Julian would be convicted or sentenced, we're looking at perhaps 2 years more of extradition proceedings, a 10-year, to take it all the way to the Supreme Court in the US could take up to 10 years. So Julian could be 62 by the time he gets to serve a sentence back in Australia. So I think they're not worth the paper they're printed on. These assurances and this promise to serve time in Australia.
And as horrible as I'm sure it was to learn the details of the potential plan to kidnap and assassinate Julian, does that? As horrible as that is to hear, is there part of the defense is thinking, well, it's at least now we have this out in the open, and this can actually be part of our argument for why legal authorities should absolutely reject this plan.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's it's going to be it's scheduled today for the defense to be bringing that up. When Julian was in the Ecuadorian embassy, it's all now confirmed that his lawyers were being recorded through video, microphone. He had his legal papers stolen, phone records all taken, all fed back to the US. So if you compare it to a similar case, which is Daniel Ellsberg's case, where his psychiatrist was spied on by the plumbers, that case was thrown out. So we would expect the same to happen in Julian's case. But as you brought up Siggi Þórðarson earlier, one of the key witnesses of the prosecution's case, who admitted to falsifying his witness statements in exchange for him not being prosecuted. These sort of rack up all these irregularities in this case. As I started calling it the zombie case. It loses an arm, it loses a leg, but this thing just doesn't die. It just keeps coming, and it just keeps coming. I don't know what's going to stop this undead thing from pursuing Julian any longer.
What's your sense of how the U.S. plans to respond to the Yahoo News reporting. I see two options that they would take. One would be to deny this all, and you're starting to see reports in the UK press and the Australian press of anonymous officials denying this and saying, well, this Yahoo News report was just simply untrue. The other route would be to just ignore it and say, well, anything published in the media is not, that's not a kind of factual, evidentiary type of substantial material that needs to be considered by the court, so the court should ignore this. So do you think they're going to go with deny or ignore, or are they going to blend a weird combination of both?
Well, I think, what we've seen is, Pompeo basically confirmed a lot of this, through calling for the whistleblowers to be prosecuted. He sort of inadvertently confirmed that these things had gone on while he was at the CIA. There was an interview with the reporters who did the investigation. Michael Isikoff interviewed Adam Schiff, who's the leader of the Senate, the Congressional Intelligence Committee. There, he's made inquiries to the CIA to find out if this is true. The Freedom of the Press Foundation has called for a congressional inquiry into it. I don't think it's going to just drift away, but I think time will tell what happens here and whether more is revealed, in this saga.
Gabriel, thank you so much for being with us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and we will continue to follow this story, and we will have more rising up next. We'll tell you what's on our radars.